Rick Sanchez tells you, in the first 5 minutes of the show, that nothing matters. He spends the next 7 seasons proving that is a lie. There is a scene at the end of a second season episode where Rick, alone in his garage, opens a freezer, takes out a small, suffering creature, gently kills it, and then tries to do the same thing to himself. He passes out before the machine fires. The show never mentions it again. Most people remember that episode as the funny one, where Rick dates a hive mind. That scene is not an accident. It is the key to the whole show. Rick is not a nihilist. Rick is a man with a very specific wound, carrying it very badly. And everything you think is his philosophy is actually a way of not sitting in a room with it. For the next 2 hours, I want to prove that to you, scene by scene. Welcome to Ricktopus. Let's get into it. The wound that explains everything. Rick's confirmed backstory and the psychology of unresolved grief. Before any of the adventures, before the portal gun, before the drinking and the burping and the catchphrases, before Morty existed as a character that Rick had any use for, Rick Sanchez had a wife named Diane and a young daughter named Beth, and he loved them. And one day, while Rick was working in his garage, another version of himself stepped through a portal and offered him the secret to traveling between universes. Our Rick said no. He said he was done with that kind of science. He wanted to stay home. He wanted his family. The other Rick dropped a bomb into the garage. Diane died. Young Beth died. Our Rick watched it happen. That is the wound. That is the thing the show has been hiding in plain sight since the first episode. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Every scene in the whole series runs differently once you know what Rick is carrying. For the longest time, we were not allowed to be sure this was real. The show first showed us this memory in a season 3 episode where Rick had been captured by a space government and was having his brain scanned by an agent named Cornelius Daniel. Rick showed the agent this whole origin story, and then at the end of the episode, he told Morty the whole thing was fake. He said he made it up so the scanning device would accept the fake memory as real and let him plant a virus inside the machine. For years, fans argued about how much of it was true. Maybe Diane never existed. Maybe Rick never had a daughter who died. Maybe it was all a trick. Then, at the end of season 5, the show ended the argument. In the final episode of that season, Rick sat Morty down and let him see the whole story, without lying this time. The memory was real. The other Rick, the one who showed up in the garage, was a specific person the show would later give a name to. Everything the earlier episode had shown us was true. The wife, the young daughter, the bomb, all of it. And what Rick did after that is the part that matters most for understanding who he is now. He didn't mourn. He didn't cry. He didn't try to find help. He picked up his tools and he built the thing he had just refused to build. He finished the portal gun. He figured out how to travel between universes. And then he started hunting. The show shows us this in a long, quiet flashback. Rick alone in a lab. Rick alone in a spaceship. Rick killing one version of himself after another, looking for the specific Rick who did it. He doesn't find him. He keeps looking. Years pass. Rick is drinking more now. Rick is older, more hunched, more tired. He is still looking. Decades pass. He is still looking. Somewhere along the way, the other versions of himself that he is hunting figure out that Rick is coming for them, and they band together. They build a fortress in space. They call it the Citadel. They invite every Rick from every universe to come live there, safe. The whole thing is built in a strange way because of our Rick. The Citadel exists because our Rick is hunting. The whole structure of the show, the whole idea of there being many Ricks and many Mortys, all of it grows out of one man refusing to let a bomb in his garage be the end of him. He never catches the one he is looking for. He kills every other Rick he can find. Their wives are dead too, it turns out. He is not the only one. There is a whole line of men like him, all with the same story, all with the same hole in the middle of their lives. That should tell you something about who the man who killed Diane was. He didn't just kill our Rick's family. He killed a lot of people's families, and Rick could not find him. Eventually, the hunt breaks Rick down. He gives up. He stops looking. And here is where the show we know actually begins. Because Rick, tired and old and empty, lands in the garage of a version of Beth who survived. A Beth whose own father had abandoned her when she was a little girl. And he moves in. He takes that other Rick's place. He becomes a grandfather to a boy named Morty. That is the show. The whole show. The pilot episode, the drunk grandfather pulling his grandson out of bed for an adventure, begins with a broken man finally giving up on revenge and moving in with a family that is not, strictly speaking, his. Now look at what that means. Every episode you have ever watched is an episode about a man who is not doing what he actually wants to do. He wants to find the man who killed his wife. He cannot find him. So he drinks. He invents. He goes on adventures. He burps mid-sentence. He tells his grandson that nothing matters and nobody exists on purpose. And we watched all of this for years and called it a show about a funny alcoholic scientist, because that is what the show let us think. It was never that. Look at what Rick actually does with the emptiness. In season 6, the show revealed that Rick kept his original home, the house where Diane and young Beth died, under a kind of time spell. He froze the whole dimension on the day they were killed. He made it so the people who lived there could not die. They just kept aging, forever, in a loop of the worst day of his life. He built that on purpose to punish himself. And in the same house, he built a computer version of Diane, a voice in the walls, an artificial version of his dead wife, programmed to call out to him from the other room, forever just out of reach. He programmed her to remind him of what he failed to save. He programmed her to keep the wound open. A man who could do anything, who could bend the laws of reality, spent his free time building a machine whose only job was to make him feel bad forever. That is not a funny alcoholic scientist. That is something else. There is a word Rick uses over and over throughout the show. He says it when he is being silly. He says it to get Morty to cheer up. He says it like a catchphrase, the way a game show host might say, "Catch you on the flip side. Wubba lubba dub dub." For most of the show's run, it sounds like nothing. It sounds like nonsense. Gibberish a cartoon character says because he is drunk and weird. Then, in the second season, Rick's friend Bird Person casually translates it. Bird Person says that in his language, Wubba lubba dub dub means, "I am in great pain. Please help me." Watch the show back with that in your ear. Watch Rick say it while he is burping, while he is laughing, while he is stumbling around the garage, while he is brushing off a question he doesn't want to answer. He is telling everyone, constantly, all the time, that he is in pain. He is screaming for help in every episode. He just put the scream in a made-up language so nobody would hear it, including, probably, himself. Now here's the thing I want you to sit with, because it is the frame for everything else we are going to look at. Rick is not a man who believes nothing matters. A man who believes nothing matters does not spend 30 years chasing a killer through space. A man who believes nothing matters does not build a haunted house version of his wife. A man who believes nothing matters does not keep a whole dimension frozen on the day his family died, just so the pain stays fresh. A man who believes nothing matters gets bored, gets still, goes quiet. Rick is not still. Rick is never still. Rick is running. He is running from the one thing he cannot science his way out of, which is that his wife and child were murdered, and the man who did it got away. The smartest person in the universe cannot bring them back. He cannot catch the killer. He cannot even mourn them properly, because mourning means sitting in a room with a feeling, and Rick does not sit in rooms with feelings. Rick invents a machine. Rick travels to a planet. Rick drinks a drink. Rick gets in a spaceship. Rick does something, anything, anywhere, other than the one thing that would actually help him, which is to stop moving. The reason people call this show a nihilist show, a show about nothing mattering, is that Rick tells us, loudly and often, that nothing matters. He tells Morty that love is a chemical reaction. He tells Summer that nobody exists on purpose. He tells a whole dinner table that weddings are just funerals with cake. He has a whole shelf of little speeches about how meaningless everything is, and he delivers them with the confidence of a man who has figured something out that the rest of us haven't. But he has not figured anything out. He is telling himself a story. The story is that nothing matters, because if nothing matters, then it doesn't matter that Diane is dead. If nothing matters, then his revenge failing doesn't matter. If nothing matters, then he doesn't matter, and his pain doesn't matter, and he is allowed to keep drinking and keep moving and keep not feeling anything. Nihilism, for Rick, is not a belief. It is a painkiller. He takes a dose of it every morning when he wakes up, and he takes another dose every night before he goes to sleep, and without it, he would not be able to function. This is important because it explains something about the show that people get wrong all the time. The show is not telling us Rick is right. The show is showing us a man who has to be right, or he will fall apart. Those are two very different things. When Rick explains that love is just brain chemicals, we are not supposed to nod and write it down. We are supposed to notice that he is saying this about his own wife. We are supposed to notice that a man who really believed love was nothing would not have spent 30 years avenging his. Everything Rick says about meaning, nothingness, the pointlessness of life, the dumbness of caring about anything, is a person standing on top of a trap door and telling you the trap door is not there. The harder he insists, the more you should start to suspect what is under it. What is under it is Diane. What is under it is a little girl named Beth who did not get to grow up. What is under it is a garage with a bomb in it and a man who could not stop it. What is under it is the person person Rick was before any of this happened. A person the show has shown us in exactly one flashback. A man with kinder eyes and a cleaner lab coat who said no when he was offered the whole universe because he already had what he wanted. That man is still in there, somewhere. Under the drinking and the cruelty and the catchphrases, that is the man who says wubba lubba dub dub in a voice loud enough to fill a room, because the quiet version, the real version, would break him. The reason I am starting here, before we talk about anything else, is that nothing else in this video will land properly if you are still reading Rick as the funny nihilist science man. You have to see him for what he is. He is a widower. He is a father who could not save his daughter. He is a man whose worst day became his whole personality. And every wild adventure, every cartoon planet, every interdimensional gag you have ever laughed at in this show has been happening around the outside of a wound he never once got to close. That is the starting position. Everything else in this video is what you get when a man with a wound that big decides the solution is to never stop moving, never let anyone in, and never, under any circumstance, sit still long enough to feel it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. He has had 7 seasons to try. He has tried every trick a person as smart as he is can think of. He has tried distance, distraction, invention, revenge, isolation, cruelty, drinking, and lying to himself so thoroughly that he almost believed it. None of it has worked. And in the very next episode we're going to look at, someone is finally going to sit him down, look him in the eye, and name the thing he has been doing. She will only get to do it once. But once is enough to crack the whole show open. And even that crack, Rick will spend the rest of the series trying to seal shut again. Section 2. The Avoidance Architecture. Pickle Rick as a clinical case study. There is an episode in the 3rd season called Pickle Rick. You have probably heard of it. It became one of the most famous episodes of the entire show, to the point where it leaked out into the wider culture and became a meme, a Halloween costume, a line people shouted at each other in grocery stores. I'm Pickle Rick! The whole joke of it, on the surface, is right there in the title. Rick turns himself into a pickle. He cannot move. He cannot talk at first. He is a pickle. It is stupid. And the show knows it is stupid, and that is supposed to be the point. Except the episode is not actually about the pickle. The episode is about why Rick turned himself into a pickle. And the answer to that question is the single most honest thing the show has ever said out loud about who Rick really is. To understand what is happening in Pickle Rick, you have to look past the rats and the sewers and the government facility and pay attention to what is going on in the other half of the episode, which takes place in a small room with 4 chairs in it. Here is what is happening. The school has told Beth that her kids, Morty and Summer, need to go to family therapy. They have been acting out. Morty is doing weird things. Summer is doing weird things. The principal wants the whole family to go see a therapist together and sort it out. Beth agrees. Jerry is not invited because Beth and Jerry are getting divorced at this point in the show, which is its own whole mess. So it is just Beth, Morty, Summer, and Rick who are supposed to go. Rick does not want to go. Rick does not just not want to go. Rick does not want to go so badly that he decides, rather than get in the car and drive to a small office for 1 hour, to turn himself into a pickle. He has built a machine that can turn him into a pickle. He turns himself into a pickle. Then, and this is the key part, he hides the thing that would turn him back. He makes it so the only way he can stop being a pickle is if someone else injects him with a serum. He has locked the exit. He has made sure that he cannot, under any circumstances, make it to that therapy appointment. Because if the pickle could undo itself, Beth would make him go. So he takes the option off the table. Morty, when he finds out, has one question, and it is the question the whole episode is built around. Morty asks his grandfather, why? Why would you do this? Why would anyone do this? And Rick gives an answer that sounds like an answer, but is really just a bunch of words arranged in a circle. He says the reason anyone would do this, if they could, which they can't, would be because they could, which they can't. It is nonsense. Rick is not explaining anything. He is doing what he always does when someone asks him a real question, which is to talk fast enough that the question gets lost. Now, the show splits in two. Rick the Pickle ends up in a sewer. He attaches the legs and arms of dead rats and cockroaches to himself. He builds a little suit of animal parts so he can move. Then he kills everything in the sewer. Then he climbs up into a government building. Then he kills everything in that building too. It is one of the most violent sequences the show has ever done. It is a genuinely impressive set piece. And the reason the show spends all this time showing us Rick the Pickle doing all this crazy stuff is so we feel, in our bones, just how hard he is working. Meanwhile, in the other half of the episode, the family is sitting in a small room with a therapist. The therapist is a woman named Dr. Dr. Wong. She is played by an actress named Susan Sarandon, and she delivers one of the best performances the show has ever gotten out of anyone. She is calm. She is quiet. She does not get rattled. She is not impressed by Beth's defensiveness. She is not impressed by Summer's attitude. She is not impressed by Morty's nervousness. She is a person who has seen a lot of families, and she can tell the second this one walks in exactly what is going on. At one point, right in the middle of the therapy session, Rick bursts into the room. He has finished his pickle adventure. He has killed everything. He is dripping in blood and rat guts. He is covered in filth. He is there because the machine that will turn him back into a human is in Beth's purse, and he needs it. And Dr. Wong, instead of being shocked, just looks at him and, very gently, asks him why he did not want to come to therapy. Rick has a speech ready. Of course he does. Rick always has a speech ready. He says he does not respect therapy. He says he is a scientist. He says he invents, transforms, creates, and destroys for a living. And when he does not like something about the world, he changes it. He says he doesn't think going to some office in a strip mall to listen to, and this is his phrase, an agent of averageness explain which words mean which feelings has ever helped anyone do anything. He says therapy just helps people get comfortable and stop panicking, which is the state of mind we put animals in right before we eat them. And he is not a cow. He is a pickle when he feels like it. It is a great speech. It sounds good. Rick is smart. Rick knows how to make a speech sound good. And for most of the show, up until this exact moment, this kind of speech is what the show uses to make Rick seem cool, to make him seem above it all, to make him seem like he has figured out a truth that the rest of us haven't. But this time, the show does something different. Dr. Wong lets him finish. She waits. And then she says the thing that, if you are paying attention, changes the whole series. She tells him that the only connection between his unquestionable intelligence and the sickness destroying his family is that everyone in his family, him included, uses intelligence to justify sickness. She tells him that he seems to go back and forth between thinking his mind is a force that cannot be stopped and thinking his mind is a curse he cannot escape. And she tells him why. She says the only thing he cannot approach, the only thing he cannot stand to think about is that it is his mind and it is within his control. He chose to come here. He chose to talk. He chose to mock her job, just like he chose to turn himself into a pickle. She says he is the master of his universe, and yet he is dripping with rat blood and sewage. His enormous mind, her words, literally vegetating by his own hand. And then she says the line that I think about more than any other line in this whole show. She tells him she has no doubt he would be bored by therapy, the same way she is bored when she brushes her teeth, the same way she is bored when she wipes. Because the thing about repairing, maintaining, and cleaning, she says, is that it is not an adventure. Stop and let that sit. What Dr. Wong has just told Rick in under a minute in a room full of his family is this: you are not smarter than therapy. You are not above it. You are not too big for it. You just do not want to do the boring part of being a person. You do not want to clean up your own life. You will happily build a rat exoskeleton in a sewer because that is dramatic. That is interesting. That has action and risk, and you get to show off. But sitting quietly in a room and saying out loud what is wrong with you, without a chair made of rat legs, and without an audience, and without anything blowing up, is too small a job for a man like you. So you dress up the running away as a scientific adventure, and you tell yourself that is why you are not here. But the real reason you are not here is that being a person is work, and you would rather be a pickle. Rick does not answer her. He does not have a speech ready for this one. The show cuts to his face, and he just stares. He sits there, dripping in sewage, staring at her. And then the episode moves on. He takes the injection. He turns back into a human. Beth drives everyone home. What makes this scene so devastating is what happens in the car afterward. Beth tells Rick that the therapist really got to her. She calls the therapist a monologuist. Rick calls therapists weirdos. They laugh about it together. Summer and Morty in the back seat can see what is happening. Summer and Morty want to go back. Summer and Morty can tell that this woman actually saw their family. But Rick and Beth have already decided together that the session was dumb and the therapist was a weirdo, and they are fine, actually. They are going to go get drinks. They are going to close the door that was briefly opened. They are going to get comfortable again and stop panicking, which is the exact state of mind Rick told Dr. Wong he did not want. He lied. He wanted it the whole time. He just did not want to admit he wanted it. Now, zoom out, because this is the pattern. This is not just one episode. This is Rick's entire way of being alive. When Rick has a feeling he does not want to have, he builds something. That is the rule. He turns himself into a pickle. pickle. He builds a private toilet on a private planet. He freezes a whole dimension in time. He builds a computer version of his dead wife. He invents a portal gun. He goes on an adventure. He gets in the spaceship. He opens a portal. He does not want to feel the thing, so he does a thing instead. And because he is the smartest person in the universe, the things he does are incredibly impressive. He builds rat suits. He ends wars. He solves problems that would take normal people a lifetime to even understand. And all of it, every bit of it, is him not doing the one thing that would actually help, which is sitting in a room and saying out loud why he is so angry and so sad and so tired. Dr. Wong is the first person in the show who says this to his face. She is not the last. But she is the first, and she gets through exactly once, for about 30 seconds, before Rick gets back in the car and laughs it off with Beth and never goes back. There is a tiny detail in the show that I want to put here, because it matters for later. Many seasons after this episode, the show quietly lets us know that Rick has, in fact, kept going to therapy. Not often, not consistently, but he still sees Dr. Wong. It is mentioned in the 7th season, almost as a throwaway. Rick uses it, of all things, as an excuse to not answer the phone. "Don't stigmatize mental health," he says, sarcastic, half joking. But he was in therapy. He goes sometimes. That one speech from her, all those seasons ago, did not fix him. But it did not entirely leave him either. Somewhere inside, in a place he would never talk about, it stuck. He kept coming back. Not enough to change, but enough to keep the door open. That is the real legacy of the Pickle Rick episode. The meme version of it is one of the most famous things the show ever produced. "I'm Pickle Rick!" Fists in the air, a Halloween costume, a viral moment. The meme took the loudest part of the episode and cut away everything around it. The meme kept the rat suit and dropped the therapist, which is fitting because that is exactly what Rick does. He keeps the adventure and drops the therapist. He keeps the bit where he is impressive and hides the bit where someone looked him in the eye and told him he was running. We were doing the same thing the show was showing Rick doing. We watched the pickle. We laughed at the pickle. We bought the shirt of the pickle. And we mostly missed the quiet woman in the small office who, for 1 minute, had the smartest man in the universe completely dead to rights. She told him the truth. He stared at her. He said nothing. He went home. And the show has spent every season since then showing us, in one way or another, what happens to a person when the truth gets said to them out loud and they decide, deliberately, to go on pretending they did not hear it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Now, Avoidance this big does not stay politely tucked away inside a single episode. It leaks. It finds other rooms to live in. And a year and a half before Pickle Rick aired, the show gave us the clearest picture it has ever given of where all this avoiding actually leads. When the pickle suit comes off and the adventure ends, and Rick is finally, briefly, alone. He did not turn into a pickle that night. He built something much worse, in his own garage, with the door closed. Section 3. The suicide attempt nobody talks about. Autoerotic assimilation and depressive realism. The last scene of this episode is, without exaggeration, the saddest thing the show has ever done, and almost nobody talks about it. Part of the reason nobody talks about it is that the episode it happens in has one of the dumbest titles in the whole series. Autoerotic assimilation. It sounds like a joke. A lot of it is a joke. For most of its 22 minutes, the episode is a bright, silly, science fiction adventure. Rick and Morty and Summer are flying through space, they pick up a distress signal, they land on a spaceship, and they meet an old girlfriend of Rick's. Except, the girlfriend is not a person. The girlfriend is a mind. One single mind that has slowly taken over a whole planet full of people. Every man, every woman, every child on this planet has been hollowed out and is now being puppeted by the same central consciousness. The mind calls itself Unity. Rick used to date it. They have a history. The episode is 2.5 seasons in. It aired in 2015. It is not a new show at this point. The audience is used to Rick acting like Rick. And for most of the episode, that is exactly what we get. Rick reconnects with Unity. They start a relationship again, which is a weird thing to say about a single consciousness operating hundreds of bodies at once, but that is the show. They have a wild time. They take drugs together. Rick uses Unity's abilities to throw the biggest party he has ever thrown. He is having, by his own standards, the best time of his life. Meanwhile, his grandkids get stuck on the planet. Summer gets upset because Unity is, in her view, basically enslaving a whole species. Morty tries to reason with her. There is a whole side plot about race and cooperation and the uncomfortable ways Unity keeps the planet running smoothly. All of this stuff matters for understanding the episode, but it is not why I am telling you about it. I am telling you about it because of how it ends. Unity, at a certain point, figures out what everyone everyone around Rick eventually figures out, which is that Rick is bad for her. Being with Rick makes her worse. Rick's energy, Rick's indulgences, Rick's refusal to take anything seriously, all of it is dragging her down. She starts losing control of the planet. Parts of the population, briefly free of her, immediately start killing each other. She cannot hold it together while Rick is in the picture. She has to choose between him and herself. She chooses herself. She writes him a letter. She does not say goodbye to his face. She writes it down and leaves it somewhere he will find it. In the letter, she tells him that she has to leave. She tells him that she loses who she is when she is with him. She tells him, and this is the line that matters, that the reason she has to leave is because in a strange way, he is better at what she does than she is, without even trying. What she does is swallow people whole, take them over, absorb them into herself. That is her whole thing. And she is telling Rick that he does this too, to the people in his life, just by being around them. He does not even have to try. They dissolve into him anyway. She cannot compete with that. She does not want to, so she is leaving. Rick reads the letter, and this is where the episode stops being an episode and starts being something else. The show does not linger on his reaction. He just gets quiet. He leaves the planet. He goes home. The grandkids stumble into the house, happy to be alive, talking about their adventure, and Rick walks past them without saying anything. He goes down into the garage. He closes the door. A song starts playing. It is a real song, a sad song by a band called Chaos, called Do You Feel It? It is slow. It has this specific kind of aching quality. The song takes over the whole back end of the episode. There is almost no dialogue from here on, just the music and Rick and what Rick does next. In the garage, Rick walks over to a freezer and opens it. Inside the freezer is a small creature, one of those twisted, fleshy, wrong-looking creatures the show sometimes draws. It is alive. It is suffering. It looks like it has been like this for a long time. We do not know exactly what it is. We do not know where it came from. The show never tells us. What we know is that Rick has been keeping it frozen in his garage, and now he is taking it out. He holds it. He looks at it. He is gentle with it, and then he kills it. He uses a device he has built to end its suffering. He puts it down, the way you would put down a sick animal. He is crying a little while he does it, and then he puts his own head under the same device. The song is still playing. Rick is still crying. He is not making a speech. He is not being dramatic. He is just quietly setting up the machine and putting himself inside it. He is trying to turn it on himself. He passes out before it fires. That is the only reason he does not die. His head is in the machine, and the alcohol in his system finally catches up to him, and he slumps forward and loses consciousness. The machine does not go off. He wakes up the next morning, alive, with his head in the machine. The episode ends with him sitting there, the sun coming up, while outside the window, Jerry is cheerfully mowing the lawn. That is the last scene. That is how the episode ends. No speech, no comment from anyone else. No character the next week mentioning it. Morty and Summer do not know what happened. Beth does not know what happened. The audience knows. We are the only ones who saw it, and the show trusts us to have seen it and to carry it with us and to understand what we just watched. I want to be very careful about how I talk about this scene because it is a serious thing the show depicted, and it deserves serious treatment. Here is what the scene is showing us. It is showing us what happens to Rick when he is alone, when there is no Morty to drag along, when there is no adventure to build, when there is no therapist to argue with, when there is no pickle suit to engineer, when the distraction runs out and the lights in the garage are on, and it is just him and the feeling he has been outrunning for his entire life. This is the shape of it when you finally see it. It is not loud. It is not announced. Rick does not leave a note. He does not call anyone. He does not write a speech. He just quietly kills something that has been suffering in the dark, and then he treats himself the same way. In his head, he is not doing anything different. In his head, he and the creature are the same thing. Both of them have been sitting in that freezer for a long time. Both of them are things the experiment did not work on. Both of them are tired. That is what the scene is showing us. A man who, for one moment, looks at himself the way he looks at a broken experiment. Something to be cleaned up. Something to be ended quietly, so it does not have to hurt anymore. And the show makes one specific choice that I think is the most important choice it has ever made. The show does not resolve this. The show does not give us a moment in the next episode where Rick sits down with Morty and says, I had a bad night, I want to talk about it. The show does not cut to a therapy session. The show does not have Beth find him and hug him. The show does not make any of the other characters know. The very next episode opens with Rick back to normal, drinking, joking, inventing, being Rick, as if the garage scene never ever happened. On a first watch, that can feel like the show is dropping the thread, like the writers forgot, like the scene was a one-off that did not go anywhere. But the more you watch the show, the more you realize that the fact that it does not go anywhere is the point. This is what depression actually looks like in a lot of people. It does not come with a neat resolution. It does not get processed in a shared conversation. It does not lead to a cry for help. It happens in a garage at 3 a.m. with the door closed, and then the person wakes up and puts their clothes on and goes back out into the world, and nobody in their life ever finds out how close they came to not being there. The show is showing us that Rick is one of those people, the kind of person who will be fine at breakfast the next day, the kind of person who will make a joke about cereal, the kind of person whose family will have no idea. If the show had given us a big emotional scene afterward, if Beth had walked in and cried, if Morty had said, "Grandpa, are you okay?" it would have been a different show. It would have been a show that thinks people who feel like this eventually get to talk about it. But Rick does not get to talk about it. Rick will not let himself. So the show honors that. It does not give him a conversation he would not have. It just shows us what happened, and it lets us hold it, and it moves on. The cruelty of this, and also the truthfulness of it, is that most of the fans who watched this episode at the time did not register what the ending was. They remember the episode as the Unity episode, the funny one where Rick hooks up with the hive mind. If you ask the internet about autoerotic assimilation, a lot of people will describe it as one of the better adventure episodes of season 2. They will mention the party. They will mention the breakup letter. Some of them will mention that it was sad. Fewer of them will describe what actually happens in the garage at the end. And that gap between what the episode is and what most people remember the episode being tells you something important about how the show is built. The show does not demand that you see it. The show puts it in front of you and lets you see it if you are ready. If you are not ready, you can watch the episode and feel vaguely bad without knowing why, and go on with your day. Now, here is the part that actually matters. Look at what the episode is saying all the way through, before the final scene even happens. The whole plot is about a person Rick loved leaving him because he was destroying her. Unity's letter is the argument. She tells him directly that being around him makes her worse. She tells him directly that he swallows people. She is not a villain when she says this. The show does not frame her as wrong. The show frames her as correct. She is doing the healthy thing. She is getting out. She is saving herself. And Rick's reaction to being told correctly that he destroys the people who love him is to go home and try to destroy himself. That is the sentence the episode is building toward. That is the whole thing. Someone tells Rick the truth, and Rick cannot survive hearing it. So he goes home and does to himself what he has been doing to the people around him. He hurts himself because he cannot stand being the person they describe. The self-hate that powers everything else he does in the show is, in this one scene, turned around and pointed inside. And if he had not passed out, it would have worked. He passes out, he wakes up, he keeps going, the show keeps going, and he will spend the next 5 seasons pretending none of this ever happened, pretending to himself that he is fine, pretending to Morty that nothing matters and it does not bother him. He is very good at the pretending. He has had decades of practice, but the scene is still there at the bottom of the show like a weight. Every time Rick insists that nothing matters, I think about the garage. Every time Rick says love is a chemical reaction, I think about the garage. Every time someone tries to read Rick as a cool, cynical, liberated nihilist who has seen through the illusion of caring, I think about the song starting to play and the freezer opening and a man holding a small, suffering thing and deciding for 1 minute that he and it are the same. That is what is under the nihilism. That is what the jokes are covering for. That is the man. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And if you think what he did to himself in that garage was the worst thing he is capable of, wait until you see what he has already done years earlier to the 12-year-old boy sleeping upstairs. Section 4, Morty's Trauma Ledger. Rick Potion number 9, and the Burial of the Self. The 6th episode of the show. Not the 20th, not the 50th, the 6th. We are still learning who these people are. We have met Rick, we have met Morty, we have seen a couple of adventures, we have laughed. The show is still introducing itself. It is still, in the public's mind, a goofy cartoon about a drunk scientist and his grandson. And then, about 15 minutes into episode 6, the show does something that changes what it is forever. The episode is called Rick Potion number 9. The setup is a joke. Morty has a crush on a girl at school named Jessica. There is a school dance coming up. Morty, being 12 years old and hopeful in the way only 12-year-olds are, asks his grandfather to help him. them. Specifically, he asks Rick if there is some kind of science thing Rick can make that will make Jessica fall in love with him. Rick, lazy and half drunk, says sure. He whips up a love potion out of what he calls Vol DNA. He hands it to Morty. He tells him to put it on Jessica at the dance and see what happens. This is the moment the whole episode hinges on. Rick knows, or at least should know, that this is a bad idea. Rick does it anyway because he does not feel like arguing, and because Morty is pestering him, and because fixing real problems for a kid is more work than handing him a magic fix and seeing what happens. That is the Rick pattern we are already starting to see, even this early in the show. When he does not want to do the hard parent thing, he gives a kid a weapon and lets them handle it. Morty goes to the dance. He gets Jessica alone. He puts the potion on her. It works. She falls in love with him. But what Rick did not account for, or could not be bothered to account for, is that it is flu season, and Jessica has the flu. The love potion attaches itself to the flu virus. The flu virus is airborne. Jessica sneezes. Within an hour, every person in the town who is not a blood relative of Morty's is in love with Morty. Within a day, it has spread across the world. Within a couple of days, the entire planet is chasing him. This is where the episode stops being funny. Rick tries to fix it. He makes an anti-serum out of praying mantis DNA. It does not work. The whole world turns into praying mantis people. All of them still in love with Morty. All of them now also trying to mate with him in the way praying mantises do, which is to say, violently. Rick tries again. He makes another fix. This one is worse. Every praying mantis person on Earth melts into a fleshy, bent, wrong-looking creature, a monster. The show calls them Cronenbergs, after a filmmaker famous for this kind of body horror. The entire population of the planet is now a twisted meat thing, still vaguely wanting Morty, but mostly just wandering around dying. Rick has, in under a day, ended the human species. He takes it reasonably well, considering. He shrugs. He admits he is messed up. He tells Morty he has one last solution, an emergency backup. And then, and this is where the episode goes from bad to something else entirely, Rick explains what the solution is. There are, Rick says, an infinite number of realities. Somewhere, in one of them, a version of Rick successfully fixed this problem. And then, a few hours later, that version of Rick and that version of Morty happened to die. Maybe in a lab accident, maybe in a car crash. Some coincidence. Rick can find that specific reality. He can open a portal to it. He and Morty can walk through the portal. They can find the dead bodies of the other Rick and the other Morty. They can bury them in the backyard, and then they can take their places, slide into the lives of the dead versions of themselves, live in their house, sleep in their beds, eat at their table. The family will have no idea. To them, nothing will have changed. Their Rick and their Morty walked into the garage yesterday and walked out today, same as always. That is the plan. That is the emergency solution. Leave their world to rot. Find another one where someone fixed the problem for them, and then replace the people who did it. They do it. Rick opens a portal. They step through. The other Rick and the other Morty are lying there, dead on the floor, killed in a small explosion. Rick grabs a shovel. They go out into the backyard. They dig 2 holes. They put the bodies in. They bury themselves. Morty is 12. He is watching his grandfather push dirt onto what is, in every way that matters, his own corpse. The face in the dirt is his face. The clothes on the body are his clothes. The only reason he is not that boy is a technical detail about which reality is which. Morty is digging a hole for Morty. The scene is not scored like a joke. The scene is not played for laughs. A song starts playing. It is a slow, sad song by the band Mazzy Star called Look On Down from the Bridge. Morty keeps shoveling. His face does not move. When they are done, he walks back into the house. He sits on the couch. He stares at nothing. The family he left behind on the old planet, the real family, the one he was born to, is out there somewhere being eaten by meat monsters. And the family in front of him, smiling and chatting and watching television, are strangers wearing the faces of his mom, his dad, and his sister. He can never tell them. If he tells them, it breaks them. So he sits on the couch and he keeps his mouth shut, and the episode ends. That is the 6th episode of the show. Think about what just happened to this kid. Think about what the show is asking the audience to understand about him from this point forward. Morty has buried himself. Morty has abandoned his actual mother and father and sister. Morty has agreed, because what else could he do, to spend the rest of his life pretending to belong to a family that is not his. Morty is 12 years old and carrying the biggest secret any person has ever carried, and he is carrying it alone, because the only other person who knows is Rick, and Rick does not think it is a big deal. Now here's the part that matters most. The show never undoes this. The show never goes back. That world, with Morty's real family stuck in it, stays broken. We visit it again a few times times across the seasons, and it stays a wasteland. The real Jerry, the real Beth, the real Summer, the show calls them the Cronenberg world family, are still stuck there, and the show explicitly shows us that they are not okay. They survive, they fight off monsters, they build a little life, but they are not fine, and our Morty knows they are not fine, and our Morty does not do anything about it because he cannot. So every time you see Morty on screen after episode 6 of the first season, something is happening under the surface. He is not Morty. He is the Morty who replaced a Morty. He is living someone else's life. He told himself this was okay because the alternative was being torn apart by a planet that loved him, but it was never okay, and some part of him has been carrying that every day. Watch what he does 2 episodes later. There is an episode called Rixty Minutes, which comes right after. It is mostly a silly episode about television from other dimensions, but in the middle of it, Summer gets upset and wants to run away from home. She feels like she does not belong. She is having a bad day, and Morty, who is her younger brother, who is supposed to be the one she is taking care of, sits her down on the bed and tells her a story. He tells her, straight out, what happened. He tells her about the love potion, and the Mantis people, and the Cronenbergs. He tells her about the other reality. He tells her there is a grave in the backyard with his body in it. He makes her go out and look at it. He shows her the dirt. And then he says something that has become one of the most quoted lines in the whole show. He tells her that nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody is going to die. Come watch TV. People quote that line like it is a cool little piece of life advice. Like Morty has figured out a truth grown-ups are too scared to say. Like it is a catchphrase. It is not a catchphrase. It is the sound of a 12-year-old trying to survive something that should not happen to a 12-year-old. He is not being philosophical. He is telling his sister the only thing that has gotten him through the last 2 weeks without breaking apart, which is that if nothing matters, then burying yourself in the backyard does not matter. If nobody belongs anywhere, then it does not matter that he does not belong in this family. If everybody dies, then the fact that a version of him already did is not a big deal. He is not telling her a truth. He is telling her the lie he has been telling himself, because the lie is the only thing keeping him upright. He is 12. He is terrified. He is alone inside his own head, and the only tool he has been given by the grandfather who walked him into this mess is the same painkiller Rick uses. Nothing matters. Don't think about it. Come watch TV. Morty's whole personality for the rest of the show makes sense once you see this. Morty flinches a lot. Morty stutters. Morty is nervous around danger in a way Rick finds annoying. Morty also, sometimes, goes completely still when something terrible happens in a way that does not match a normal 12-year-old. He has already been through the worst thing. He already had to bury himself. Compared to that, the aliens and the monsters and the guns are easy. The hard part already happened in his own backyard with a shovel. And here is the thing I want you to hold in your head as we go further into the show. The person who did that to him is the same person who is driving him around the universe every week pretending everything is fine. Rick is not just Morty's grandfather. Rick is the person who handed a 12-year-old a shovel and asked him to dig. Rick is the person who decided, without asking, that the emotional cost of that was small enough to be worth it. Rick is the person who has never, not once, sat Morty down and said, I am sorry about the other Morty. Not in 7 seasons. Not in any episode. Rick has never apologized for the hole in the backyard. Morty has never asked for an apology either. And the reason he has never asked is part of the same problem, the same quiet damage that starts in episode 6 and never really gets healed. Morty learned from that event that terrible things happen, and then you do not talk about them, and then you just keep going. That is his whole system now. That is the script Rick wrote for him, by example, in a single afternoon. For the rest of the show, Morty is going to keep going on adventures. He is going to keep flinching. He is going to keep being dragged into things that are way too big for him. And mostly, he is going to keep quiet about what any of it is doing to him. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. He is going to stay quiet right up until he finds out that Rick has been reaching into his head the whole time without his permission. Because burying yourself in the backyard is one thing. Having the memory of it and every other thing that has hurt you pulled out of your skull and stored in a jar by the man who put it there is something else. Section 5. Morty's Mind Blowers. The Psychology of an Erased Childhood. There is an episode in the 3rd season called Morty's Mind Blowers. On the surface, it looks like one of those anthology episodes the show does sometimes, where the plot is thin and the real point is a string of short, funny sketches. And if that is all you take from it, you would not really be missing a joke or two. You would be missing the quiet horror the whole episode is built on. The setup is this. Rick and Morty come home from an adventure. Morty is rattled. Something happened out there that he does not want to carry around anymore. He asks Rick if Rick can take the memory out of his head. And Rick, very casually, says, sure, come with me. Rick Rick leads him down into a secret underground room. It is under the garage. The whole family lives in this house. Nobody else in the family knows the room exists. Inside the room is a wall of tubes. Each tube is a different color. Each tube contains one of Morty's memories, a whole wall of them, some red, some blue, some purple, lit up like a science fair display. Morty stares at the wall. He asks the question any of us would ask. How long has this been going on? How many times has he asked Rick to do this? And Rick, with the same relaxed shrug he uses when he is explaining any other thing, tells him a lot of times. Many, many times. Morty has been coming down here, or being brought down here, for years. He does not remember coming here. Obviously, that is the whole point. Every time he came, Rick took the memory of coming along with whatever else he was erasing. So the tubes also contain memories of making the tubes. It is a system designed so that the person it is being done to can never catch it happening. Rick, for fun, decides they are going to spend the episode going through some of the tubes. He calls it a greatest hits. He is going to show Morty what is in them, and we, the audience, are going to get to watch. This is the show at its most playful in its format. It feels like a joke, a tour through a cabinet of deleted scenes. Then the memories start playing. The first one is about a guidance counselor at Morty's school, a kind man named Mr. Loonis. Morty, through a series of misunderstandings, accidentally convinces other people that Mr. Loonis is a criminal. He is not. He is a good person. He is a veteran. He just happens to, for complicated reasons, be able to live on the surface of the moon, which Morty mishears as him being a creep. Morty tells the principal. The principal tells the police. The police question Mr. Loonis. His reputation gets destroyed, and at the end of that chain of events, because Morty was careless with information and nobody believed him when he tried to take it back, Mr. Loonis kills himself. Morty finds out. Morty cannot live with it. Rick takes it out of his head. That is the first memory in the cabinet. A man is dead because Morty made a mistake. Morty is 12. Rick decided that the right thing to do with a feeling that big was to reach into his grandson's brain and scoop it out. The second memory is similar. A creature in another dimension was having a crisis of faith, and Morty, trying to be helpful, convinced him there was no afterlife. A few minutes later, the creature got hit by a car and died, screaming in terror the whole way down. Morty had to watch. Rick pulled it. The third one is different. The third one is about Morty choking on some kind of alien worm. A real, urgent, life-threatening situation. And in the memory, his mom and his sister are standing there watching, and his grandfather is standing there watching, and none of them help him. They just make fun of him while he struggles to breathe. Morty got through it on his own. Rick pulled that memory too, but not because it was too painful for Morty. He pulled it because Morty had started to resent his family, and Rick wanted that resentment gone. That is one of the first hints that something is wrong with this whole system. Rick is not just erasing things Morty asked him to erase. Rick is editing Morty. Rick is deciding, on his own, which feelings Morty gets to keep. Another memory comes up, and this one is a real punch. In this one, Beth, Morty's own mother, had to choose between saving Summer or saving Morty. Two of her kids in danger at the same time. She had a split second. She chose Summer. She did not hesitate. She did not look back. Morty saw it. Morty understood it. Morty had to carry around the fact that his mom, in the moment when it really counted, picked his sister. And then Rick took it out. And Morty went back to loving his mom the way a son is supposed to love his mom, never knowing that underneath, somewhere, she had already told him the truth about where he ranked. Morty starts to notice something as they go through the tubes. The tubes are different colors. Some are one color, some are another. Morty asks Rick what the colors mean. Rick lies at first, but Morty pushes, and eventually Rick admits it. One of the colors is for memories that upset Morty. The other color is for memories that upset Rick. Let that sit. Rick has been reaching into his 12-year-old grandson's head and removing things for his own comfort. Memories where Rick looked dumb. Memories where Rick lost. Memories where Rick mispronounced a word, or got outplayed at a game, or was embarrassed in front of the family. In one case, one of Rick's erased memories is just a time he said the phrase, taking things for granted, instead of taking things for granted. He misspoke. He made a small mistake. He decided he could not live with Morty knowing about it. So he drilled into his grandson's brain and pulled the memory out by the root. This is the moment in the episode where the joke breaks. This is where the cabinet stops being a funny cabinet and starts being evidence of something else. Rick is not just a grandfather who takes his grandson on wild adventures. Rick is a man who has been quietly, for years, shaping the version of himself that lives inside Morty's head. The Morty who sits next to Rick in the spaceship every week, who looks up at him, who trusts him, who follows him into danger, is not a Morty who has been allowed to see Rick clearly. That Morty has been curated. The parts of Rick that would have let Morty draw a real conclusion about what kind of man his grandfather is have been deleted, quietly, night after night, in a room Morty does not remember walking into. Morty realizes this, and Morty, understandably, loses it. There is a scuffle. The memory erasing gun goes off in the wrong direction. Both of them get hit. Rick forgets who Rick is. Morty forgets who Morty is. They wake up on the floor in a room full of glowing tubes with no idea who they are, why they are there, or who the other person is. They have to figure it out using the tubes. They start injecting themselves with memories, trying to piece together their own lives. And because the tubes are almost entirely full of traumatic, painful, shameful, horrible things, what they learn about themselves is unbearable. Morty, in particular, injects one memory after another, and slowly comes to understand that his life is, from the evidence in this room, a tour of humiliations and disasters. He sees Mr. Loomis. He sees his mother choosing his sister. He sees himself getting tortured in ways he cannot believe a person has survived. He sees it all at once, with no context, with no distance. He sees the ledger, and he decides he does not want to be that person anymore. He tells Rick, this stranger he does not recognize, that he is going to kill himself, that there is no point, that if this is what is in the room, then whoever he is not worth being. And here's the part of the episode that I think about more than any other part. Rick, who does not know who Morty is, who does not remember that this is his grandson, who does not remember anything, looks at this crying kid in front of him and says, "Fine, fine, I'll do it with you." He says, "I do not know much, but I do know that whatever you have brewing in your head really connected with you, and I am not going to tell you it doesn't matter." He volunteers, without a second thought, without a speech, to die alongside Morty. That is Rick with no memory. That is Rick stripped of every defense. That is Rick without the jokes, without the drinking, without the catchphrases, without the armor. When he has none of that, and a kid he does not know tells him he is going to end it, Rick's instant response is, "I will come with you. I will not let you do this alone." The Rick we see in the show every week would never say that out loud. The Rick we see every week would make a joke. The Rick we see every week would roll his eyes. But that Rick is built on top of layers and layers and layers of avoidance. Take the layers off, and what is at the bottom of him is something very soft and very scared and completely incapable of letting a suffering person go through it by themselves. The reason this scene works, the reason it matters so much, is because it accidentally tells us what Rick actually feels about Morty, underneath all the dismissive stuff he says in every other episode. He acts like Morty is a nuisance. He acts like Morty is a tool. He acts like Morty is a dumb kid he has to drag around. But in a room where the memories are gone, where he does not have to keep up the act because he does not know there is an act to keep up, Rick's instinct is to die with him rather than let him die alone. They do not die, of course. Summer walks in. Summer, whose name appears in none of this, has walked in on this situation before. She knows what to do. She has a note taped to the wall from Rick that explains how to fix it when this specific problem happens. She tranquilizes them both. She resets their memories. She drags their unconscious bodies upstairs. She puts them on the couch in front of the television. When they wake up, they do not remember being in the cabinet room at all. They do not remember the fight. They do not remember the suicide pact. They are just confused about why they feel groggy and why Summer is giving them a look. Rick makes a joke. Morty laughs. The episode ends. So everything resets. Everything goes back to normal. None of them will remember any of this tomorrow, because of course they will not. The whole system is designed to make sure they do not. Morty goes back to being a kid who adventures with his grandpa. Rick goes back to being a grandpa who takes a kid on adventures. Summer goes back to being the one who quietly cleans it up. Again, because it has happened before, and it will happen again. And the cabinet sits under the garage, full, ready to receive the next memory Morty cannot handle, or Rick cannot allow. This is the texture of what Rick has built. It is not dramatic, it is not announced. It is a room under a room that erases the thing that would make you run. It is a grandfather who has decided, alone, which parts of a boy's life the boy gets to keep. It is a sister who has a printed set of instructions for what to do if her grandfather and brother try to kill themselves. It is a whole family held together by deletions. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. And here is the part that should make you stop. This whole apparatus, the cabinet, the erasing, the editing, the quiet manipulation of a child's mind did not come out of nowhere. Rick did not invent this system for Morty. He learned it a lot earlier on someone a lot closer to him than Morty. Someone who came out of it shaped exactly the way a person would be shaped if their father had been doing this to their feelings for their entire life. The daughter. Before there was a Morty to edit, there was a Beth. Section 6. The daughter who became him. Beth, Fruppyland, and the question of evil. There is an episode in the 3rd season called The ABCs of Beth. Before this episode, Beth was mostly a background character in her own life. She was Morty's mom. She was Jerry's wife, and then Jerry's ex. She had a job as a horse surgeon, which was played for a joke. She showed up in scenes. She had opinions about her father. She drank wine. She was a part of the furniture furniture. The show had not really told us who she was. Then this episode airs, and the furniture stands up, and we find out the furniture has been sitting on something horrible for about 30 years. The episode starts with a news report on TV. A man is about to be executed. He is on death row. He has been found guilty of murdering and eating his own son. The son's name was Tommy. The execution is tonight. There are crowds gathering outside the prison to watch. Beth sees this on the news, and she gets a strange look on her face. She tells her family, a little amused, that she used to know this family. Tommy was her best friend when she was a little girl. She tells them, laughing a little, about how when she was a kid and Tommy disappeared, she pretended he had gone to live in a magical pretend world she had made up called Fruppyland. She tells it like a memory of being a silly child with a big imagination, a coping story she made up to deal with a friend who was gone. And Rick, listening from the next room, gets offended by how she describes it, because Fruppyland, Rick reveals, was not pretend. Rick made Fruppyland for her when she was a kid. It is a real, physical place. It is a pocket universe Rick built and stuck behind a door for his daughter to play in. Cotton candy clouds, rainbow rivers, everything soft, everything safe. He even made the creatures there gentle. She can open a door to it with chalk whenever she wants. It is sitting right there where it has always been. This should sound, at first, like a wonderful thing for a dad to do. A magical world built by the smartest man in the universe as a gift for his little girl. That is what it sounds like for about 20 seconds. And then the episode does the hard turn that makes it one of the most disturbing episodes in the whole show. Rick did not build Fruppyland as a gift. Rick built Fruppyland to contain her. Because young Beth, Rick explains, was a scary child. She did not ask her genius dad to make her toys or tree houses or pet ponies. She asked him repeatedly for weapons. She wanted ray guns. She wanted a whip that would force people to like her. She wanted a sentient switchblade, an actual thinking knife that would obey her. She was asking for these things before she was 10 years old. Rick, at first, was making them for her, because that was easier than saying no, and because, in his own words, giving Beth what she wanted was less work than the other option, which was actually parenting her. At a certain point, Rick realized that his little girl was going to hurt somebody. The neighbor kids, animals, somebody. And instead of sitting her down, or getting her help, or even just telling her stop, he made Fruppyland. He built her a whole private world so she could work her violence out on something that was not real. He could not be bothered to raise her, so he built a crib the size of a universe and put her in it and let her do whatever she wanted in there. And he got to go back to his inventions. She then tells Rick she needs to go back in right now. She needs to go into Fruppyland and check something, and she is not going to tell him what. Rick goes with her. And inside Fruppyland, Rick and the audience find out what Beth was checking. She was checking for Tommy. Because here's what actually happened to Tommy, Beth's childhood best friend, the one whose dad is about to be executed for eating him. When they were kids, Beth took Tommy into Fruppyland with her. One day, she got jealous of him. She was jealous because Tommy's dad loved Tommy. Tommy had a normal dad, a dad who came to his school events, a dad who cared about him, a dad who did dad things. And Beth, whose dad was Rick, who was either not present or present and making a sentient knife in the garage, could not stand it. So, during a visit to Fruppyland, young Beth pushed Tommy into a pit of honey. She pushed him down into it so he could not climb out, and then she went home and closed the door and never opened it again. Tommy did not die. Tommy was a child, alone, in a universe with no other humans, surrounded by soft cartoon creatures that his presence slowly corrupted. He grew up in there. He did things to survive that no person should have to do. The episode is explicit and uncomfortable about what he had to do, and I am not going to detail it because the specifics are not the point. The point is that he is alive in there. He is a grown man now. He is, in a very bent way, the king of that world. And Beth, who has spent her entire adult life telling herself that Tommy must have wandered off and gotten lost, has been carrying the truth somewhere inside her the whole time, and only now, with her dad standing next to her and Tommy's father about to be killed, is she willing to walk back in and find out what she did. She and Rick find Tommy. They try to bring him back out. They try to convince him to come home so his father will not be executed. And Tommy, understandably, does not want to. He has built a life here, a horrible one, but his own. Also, he wants Beth to apologize. He wants her to admit it. He wants her to say the words, "I pushed you. I left you here. I knew what I did." Beth refuses. She will not say it. She stands there, in the room with the man whose childhood she stole, and she will not admit she stole it. Instead, she ends up killing a lot of creatures, getting Tommy injured, taking a piece of him home, and having Rick make a copy of him from it, so his father will not be executed. The copy is not Tommy. The copy is a fake. The execution gets called off because there is a live son to show, but the real Tommy is left behind, again, in Fruppyland, forever. Beth did not fix anything. She made a fake Tommy to plug the hole so she would not have to apologize. On the way home, she looks at her dad, and she says the sentence that the whole episode is really about. She tells him, "I have spent my whole life pretending you are a great guy and trying to be like you, and the ugly truth has always been." And Rick finishes the sentence for her. He says that I am not that great a guy, and you are exactly like me. That is the thing the episode was walking toward from the first minute. Beth is not just Rick's daughter in the way any kid is their parent's kid. Beth is a copy. She has the same brain. She has the same coldness. She has the same inability to say she is sorry. She has the same trick of dressing up cruelty as practicality. When she could not handle her feelings as a little girl, she pushed her best friend into a honey pit and told herself a story about where he went. When she cannot handle her feelings as an adult, she pours wine and picks fights. She is her father. She has always been her father. She just did not see it because she was raised to look up at him, and nobody can see clearly from that angle. This is the part of the episode that changes the show. Every scene with Beth in every season before this one reads differently now. Her anger, her drinking, the way she has always been defensive about her dad, the way she cannot admit when she is wrong, the way her whole personality seems just a little too big for the small life she is stuck in. All of it makes sense. She is a version of Rick who never got to leave. A Rick without a portal gun. A Rick who got pregnant at 17 and stayed, not because she wanted to, but because she did not know there was another option. And all her adult life, without knowing why, she has been copying her father's coping tricks onto a life that cannot hold them. After the Tommy mess is over, Rick, to his credit, sort of, tries to be a father for 1 minute. He sees that Beth is shaken. He sees that she is realizing what she is, and he offers her a way out. He offers to clone her, not as a weapon, as a gift. He tells her that if she wants, he can make a perfect copy of her. The copy will have all her memories. The copy will love her kids. The copy will be, for every practical purpose, Beth, and the real Beth can leave. She can take a spaceship and go anywhere in the universe she has ever wanted to go. She can figure out who she is when she is not a mother, or a wife, or a daughter. She can have a whole second life. Nobody will miss her because nobody will know she is gone. That offer, on the surface, sounds generous, but think about what it is really saying. It is Rick, at the one moment when his daughter finally sees herself clearly, handing her the same tool he uses. Do not sit with the feeling. Do not fix the problem. Replace yourself with a copy that does not feel it. Escape. Get in the ship. Anything to not have to stay in the room. The episode does not tell us what Beth chose. It cuts to black before she answers. The show spent the next few seasons dancing around the question of whether Beth is a clone or the real one. At one point later, we find out that there is in fact a copy out there in space, going on her own adventures. We meet her. She calls herself Space Beth. The two Beths meet each other. They fight, they make up. The show eventually decides, sort of, that both of them are real. That it does not matter which one got in the ship. That Beth split into two versions of herself, and both versions get to exist. That is the show's answer. It is a pretty one, and it has its own strange beauty. But it sidesteps the real thing the ABCs of Beth is trying to say. The real thing it is trying to say is this. The damage Rick has done is not only to himself. It is not only to Morty. It runs forward, through his daughter, into his grandkids. Beth is the middle of the chain. She is the child he half-raised, who grew up into the adult he half-shaped, who became the mother who is now half-raising her own kids. Everything Rick did not teach her, she did not teach them. Everything Rick never sat down and fixed in himself, she never sat down and fixed in herself. The coldness passes down. The inability to apologize passes down. The preference for adventure over maintenance passes down. She pushed a kid into a honey pit because her dad was not there. And then she grew up and drank wine and let her own kids get dragged around the universe by the same man because he was there now, and having him there was better than having him gone. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That is the pattern. That is the inheritance. And it gets even clearer and even worse in the episode that airs right after this one, when Beth's brand new fear about who she really is spirals into a paranoia that the show refuses on purpose to ever put to rest. Section 7. The Clone Paranoia. What the Richturian Morty date reveals about identity under a narcissistic parent. The very next episode after the ABCs of Beth is the season 3 finale. It is called The Richturian Morty Date. Most of it is a silly story about Rick getting into a fight with the President of the United States. That is the A plot. Keith David plays the president, the same way he always does, and he and Rick spend most of the episode trying to out-prank each other in the White House and out in the field. It is funny. It is loud. It is the kind of thing the show is very good at when it is being goofy. But there is a B plot running underneath all of it, and the B plot is what the episode is really about. The B plot is Beth. The B plot is Beth by herself, quietly losing her mind. Because the offer Rick made at the end of the last episode, the offer to clone her, the offer to let her sneak away while a copy took over her life, has been sitting in her head. And the episode before this one ended without showing us what she said. We do not know if she took the offer or turned it down. The last time we saw her, she was staring at her dad in a car while he asked her the question. Cut to black. The season finale opens a few weeks after. Beth is acting different. Her family is noticing. She is calmer than she used to be. She is being nicer to Summer. She is giving her daughter actual good advice in a clothing store. And Summer is looking at her like, who are you? Summer tells her to her face that she prefers this version of her. That the old Beth, the sharp Beth, the stressed Beth was kind of hard to be around. That this new, gentler Beth is an improvement. Beth is supposed to take this as a compliment. She does not. She takes it as evidence. Because if she is nicer now, if she is calmer now, if she is a better mother now, then maybe she is not Beth. Maybe she is the clone. Maybe the real Beth took her dad's offer, got in the ship, and left. And maybe the reason the new version of her is so much easier to be around is because the new version is a copy, a softer copy. The version of Beth that her father made on purpose to be less troublesome than the real one. If her own daughter likes this version of her better, then what does that say about what she is? Beth starts spiraling. She starts, very quietly, panicking. She does not tell the family what she is panicking about. She does not tell Jerry, because Jerry does not know about the clone offer. She does not tell the kids. She sits with it, alone, and it gets bigger and bigger in her head until she cannot carry it anymore. So she calls the only person who would know. She calls her dad. She calls Rick, who is in the middle of dodging Secret Service agents in some alien bar, and she asks him straight out, am I the clone? Did the real me take the ship and leave? Am I just the replacement? Is the version of me sitting in this kitchen right now a copy who does not know she is a copy? Because that is how the copy was designed to feel. She cannot tell. She cannot tell from the inside. She does not know how she would know. Rick does something very small with his voice and very large in its effect. He does not answer. He makes a sound. He pauses. He gives her a maybe. He says, non-committally, no. The way he says it makes it clear he is not really saying no. He is giving her the word she asked for, but he is not putting any weight behind it. It is a shrug in the shape of a word. Then he says something that actually makes it worse. He tells her, when smart people get happy, they stop recognizing themselves. And you are very smart because you are very much my daughter. He is trying to reassure her on paper. In practice, what he is saying is this. Maybe the reason you feel different is not because you are a clone. Maybe you feel different because you got a little happier and you are not used to being happy. So being happy feels weird. That is a nice thought, except it is coming from the exact man who might or might not have replaced her with a copy of herself 3 weeks ago. It is a nice thought from an untrustworthy source about the one question only he can answer for her. And then he does the worst thing he could possibly do, even though he thinks he is being funny. He adds one more question as a kind of joke. He says, and just to be sure, you are not pretending to be convinced you are real because you are actually convinced you are a clone, and you are now terrified that becoming self-aware would mean I would have to terminate you. He is teasing her. That is the tone. He is being a jerk on purpose because that is how he talks to her. But sit with the sentence he just said, because he just said out loud to his own daughter that if she figures out she is a clone, he would have to kill her. He said it as a joke. Beth does not hear it as a joke. Beth hears it as information. Because even if it is a bit, it is a bit that only makes sense if Rick has actually thought about this. If Rick has a protocol. If clones who become aware of being clones have in his system to be terminated. He would not have reached for that joke if it was not, somewhere in his mind, true. Beth loses it. She runs. She grabs the kids. She goes and gets Jerry, her ex-husband, the man she divorced because Rick made her see him as small and pathetic. She goes back to Jerry and reconciles with him on the spot. Not because she has figured out that she loves him, but because she is afraid of her father, and Jerry is the only person in the family who is not a Rick project. She grabs her kids. She tries to hide. She thinks her dad is coming to kill her. That is the back half of the episode. Beth, full-grown adult, surgeon, mother of 2, running from her father with her children in tow because a joke he made over the phone landed on her like a confession. Eventually, Rick finds them. He walks in with a gun. Beth sees the gun and absolutely breaks breaks down. She is crying, she is begging, she gives this whole frantic speech where she asks him to just let her live, to not kill her, to let her go, and please do not do it in front of the kids. And Rick, uncomfortable, looks at her like she is crazy. He tells her the gun is not for her. The gun is for Jerry, who he is annoyed at for stealing his daughter back. He was not coming to kill her. He was coming to pout. He tells her whether she is a clone or not, it does not matter. He loves her either way. He is not going to do anything. And then, at the very end, the show gives us the twist. Rick, in a later episode, admits, quietly, that he does not actually know. He does not know if Beth is a clone. He tells the show, and us, that when he made the decision to clone her or not clone her, he erased his own memory of what he did, so that even he would not know, so that even under questioning, he could not tell. The answer does not exist anymore. Beth is never going to find out. The show is never going to find out. We, the audience, are never going to find out. There is no file, there is no video, there is no machine that can tell her. The only person who could have answered the question made sure, on purpose, that the answer would be gone. This is where the episode becomes psychological in the realist way. Because what the show is doing, what it is really doing, is showing us what it actually feels like to grow up with a parent like Rick. Think about it from Beth's side. Her whole childhood, she never knew if her father's attention was real. One day he would build her a pocket universe. The next day, he would be gone for a week. One day he would make her a talking knife because she asked for one. The next day, he would forget to pick her up from school. She grew up not knowing if she was loved or just tolerated, not knowing if the version of her that her dad wanted was the real her or a performance she had learned to put on, not knowing, when he came back after 20 years, if he came back because he loved her or because he needed a place to hide. The clone question, the one she asks in this episode, is not really about a clone. It is about every question she has ever had. Am I real? Am I the version of me that is actually here? Or am I a copy that got put in place by a man who cannot tell the difference and does not care? Is the love I get from my father love? Or is it just whatever he is capable of showing? If he cannot tell me I am real, then what am I? And the answer she gets from her father is the worst possible answer. Not yes, not no, a shrug, a joke. I don't know. Don't think about it too much. You are happier when you don't. Smart people get happy when they stop knowing who they are. Go enjoy your family. That is what her father gives her when she asks, from the bottom of herself, whether she is a person. And the worst part is, it works. Beth goes home. Beth patches things up with Jerry, mostly. Beth starts acting normal again. The show moves on. But the question did not go away. You cannot ask a question that big and then just not know the answer and be fine. It stays in her. It stays in the way she drinks. It stays in the way she picks fights with her kids. It stays in the way she looks at her dad when he walks in the room. There is a small part of Beth for the rest of the show that does not know what she is and cannot ever find out and has to keep living anyway. The show is using the science fiction gimmick, the clone question, to tell a much older story. The story of a kid who grew up guessing. The story of an adult who never stopped guessing. The story of what happens to your sense of yourself when the person who was supposed to help you build it was also the person who decided, on purpose, that the foundation would never be solid enough to stand on. Rick could have given her a straight answer. He chose not to. He erased his own memory so he could not. He preferred a universe where his daughter lived in doubt to a universe where he had to commit to a yes or a no. That is the final cruelty of this episode, and it is the quietest one. He did not have to do anything dramatic. He just had to shrug, and a shrug from the right person can hollow you out for the rest of your life. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Up until this point, we have been looking at the damage Rick does to his family, his daughter, his grandson, the people inside the house. But a house is not the only place Rick has ever tried to love someone. Long before he ever moved in with Beth and Jerry, during the long, empty stretch of his life when he was drinking himself sideways and hunting the man who killed Diane, there was one other person Rick let close. A man with wings. Rick's best friend for a very long time. And one day, according to the show itself, Rick tried to tell that man something, and the man said no. That no is the hidden shape of everything Rick has done since. It is time to talk about Bird Person. Section 8. Bird Person, Blood Ridge, and the Rejected Confession. For most of the show, Bird Person is a joke character. He is a man with the head of a bird. He speaks in a very slow, very serious voice. He has no sense of humor. He shows up at a house party in the first season, and he is played for laughs because everything he says sounds like he is reading from a very sad book. He lives on a mountain. He has opinions about honor. He is, somehow, Rick's best friend, which seems ridiculous because Rick does not act like he has any friends. That is the first read. A weird Birdman Rick drinks with. Then, the second season finale happens, and the show starts putting weight on him. We find out Rick and Bird Person fought in a war together a long time ago against a government called the Galactic Federation. We find out they were part of a rebel group. We find out they have decades of history. We meet Bird Person again because he is about to get married. He is marrying a young human woman named Tammy, who is, on the surface, Summer's friend from high school. The whole Smith family flies out to the alien planet where the wedding is being held, and Rick does not want to be there. Everyone notices. He is sour. He is drinking harder than usual, which, for him, is saying something. He is short with people. He refuses to mingle. He sits in a corner and makes jokes about weddings being funerals with cake. Morty pulls him aside and begs him to lighten up. Morty tells him this is his best friend's big day, and Rick should at least try. Rick, grudgingly, agrees to give a toast. The toast he gives is one of the most important scenes in the entire show, and the reason most people do not realize that is because at the time it aired, we did not yet know what it was about. Rick stands up in front of a room full of strangers, most of them old soldiers and rebels and aliens he has known for years. He raises a glass. He starts talking. He says that he has never been subtle about how little he trusts marriage. He says he could not make his own work and he can turn a black hole into a sun, so at some point you have to ask yourself what the odds are. He says that marriage is usually a lie people tell themselves because they are afraid to die alone. And then, this is the line that matters, he adds, because that is exactly how we all die, alone. The room goes quiet. It is a weird thing to say at a wedding. And then Rick, visibly fighting himself, walks it back. He says, that is the thing, though. Bird Person is his best friend. And if Bird Person loves Tammy, then Rick loves Tammy too. He raises his glass. He toasts to friendship. He toasts to love. And then, in a line that will matter so much more the next time you watch the episode, he toasts to his next big adventure, opening himself up to others. The guests clap. Rick sits down. He has, in front of a room full of people, told the world that he is going to try to stop being who he is. He is going to try to let people in. He has said it out loud. Then Tammy stands up, and Tammy, smiling casually, reveals that she is not actually a high school senior from Earth. She is a deep cover agent for the Galactic Federation. The entire wedding has been a trap. Every rebel at this party, every old friend of Rick's, every person Bird Person has fought beside is on a federal most wanted list. And this wedding was the bait that got them all in one room. She draws a gun. Bird Person stands up. He looks at her, his new wife, the person he was just married to minutes ago, and he says her name, Tammy. What are you doing? He does not understand yet. He cannot process it. She shoots him in the chest multiple times, right there at the altar, in front of Rick. The whole room erupts into a firefight. Most of Rick's friends are killed on the spot. Squanchy, another old friend of his, makes a last stand to buy the Smith family time to run. Rick grabs his family and flees. The wedding is a massacre. This is the end of the second season. For years, this was the whole picture. A wedding turned into a trap. Rick's best friend was killed. Rick got burned for trying to be open, and the takeaway was clear. Rick opened himself up just once, just a tiny bit, and the universe immediately punished him for it. His best friend died. The woman who killed him was someone his own granddaughter brought into their lives. Everything Rick has ever believed about letting people in, about how it never works, about how it always ends with somebody you love dead on the floor, was confirmed in the space of one sentence. That is a hard enough story on its own. That alone would be enough to explain why Rick stays closed for the rest of the show, why he does not do emotional speeches, why he ducks out of anything that looks like a real conversation. He tried it once, at a wedding, and the bride shot his best friend. But then, 5 seasons later, the show adds a piece to the story that changes it completely. In the 5th season, there is an episode where Rick goes inside Bird Person's mind. Bird Person is alive, sort of, in a technical way. The Galactic Federation captured his body after the wedding and turned him into a sort of cyborg weapon. He has been dormant for years. In this episode, Rick finds a way to enter his friend's memories, to walk around inside his head, to try to wake him up. While Rick is in there, we see their history together. Not just the war, not just the rebellion, the small stuff, the campfires, the drinking, the decades they spent on the road together as revolutionaries and as friends. And we see a specific memory, a battle, a place called Blood Ridge. For the entire run of the show, up until this episode, Blood Ridge was presented as Rick's version of a war story. Something terrible that happened in combat. A battle he survived. A place where friends died. The kind of thing old soldiers do not talk about because it hurts. That is what the earlier hints implied. That is what Rick let everyone believe. But the episode shows us what Blood Ridge actually was. Blood Ridge was the place where Rick, after a battle, sat down next to Bird Person and tried to tell him something. The scene scene is quiet. They are alone. Rick is younger here. Still weary, still drinking, but younger. And he is trying to get words out. He is trying to say, without actually saying it, that he wants something more with Bird Person. That he is asking him to come travel with him. That he wants him to stay. The scene is careful with it. It does not spell out exactly what Rick is confessing, but it is clearly something deeper than a friend asking a friend to hang out. It is Rick doing the single hardest thing he has ever done, which is to open his mouth and tell another person that they matter to him. Bird Person says no. Not cruelly, not even unkindly, just no. He tells Rick that he cannot. He has his own path. He has the war to fight. He cannot go with him. That is Blood Ridge. That is the whole thing. And the reason this matters so much, the reason this is the missing piece of the whole show, is that every behavior Rick has ever shown about love, about letting people in, about the danger of caring, now has a root. Diane dying taught Rick that if you love someone, they can be taken from you by someone stronger than you. That is one kind of wound. That is the wound Section 1 was about. Blood Ridge taught him something different, and maybe worse. Blood Ridge taught him that even when the other person is alive, even when they are right there, even when they are your best friend in the world, you can still open your mouth and try to tell them how you feel, and they can say no. Not a violent no, not a tragic no, just a quiet, honest no. From someone who is kind about it, from someone who likes you, from someone who still wants to be your friend afterward. And that kind of no, Rick discovered, can wreck you in a way that a bomb cannot. Because a bomb is something that happened to you. A no is something you asked for. You chose to walk into that one. You handed over the most vulnerable thing you had and got handed it back. That is the scar that explains his behavior at the wedding. Go back and rewatch The Wedding Toast knowing this. Rick standing up at Bird Person's wedding, decades later, drunk, miserable, forcing himself to say the words love and friendship and opening myself up. That is not a man giving a supportive toast. That is a man watching the one person he ever tried to confess to marry somebody else. That is a man realizing that the answer to the question he asked at Blood Ridge was not right now. It was not ever. It was not with you. Bird Person has picked someone, and the someone is not Rick. Rick's bitterness, his sourness, his hostility to the whole event, his insistence on getting drunk and making jokes about death is the defense of a person sitting through the funeral of his one real chance. The toast he gives is him one last time trying to say the thing he has been carrying for decades. He even uses the exact language, opening myself up to others. That is not generic wedding speech language. That is the thing he tried once at Blood Ridge. And he is trying just a little to say it again out loud in front of his friend. And then Tammy stands up and shoots Bird Person. From Rick's side of the room, this is not just a political betrayal. This is the universe in real time telling him that the one time he stuck his neck out, he was right to never do it again. The lesson is delivered with bullets. Everything he ever suspected about what happens when you care confirmed in one scene in front of his whole family. And it is important that we see what this does to him, because the show does not show it directly. Rick does not sob over the body. Rick does not give a eulogy. Rick does what Rick always does. Rick gets his family out, gets them somewhere safe, and then quietly, without telling anyone, turns himself in to the same government that killed his best friend. He trades his own freedom for his family's safety. He goes to space prison. The season ends with him in a cell. On the surface, this looks like a noble sacrifice. Rick, for once, putting someone else first. Look closer. A man who just watched his one real chance at being loved get shot at the altar, who just had every fear he has ever had about letting people in confirmed out loud, who has been drinking for decades and failing and wandering and hunting a killer he cannot find, finally has a reason to vanish. Turning himself into the Federation is not just a sacrifice. It is also partly a way to stop, a way to be put somewhere he does not have to feel anything for a while, a way to hand his pain over to a guard with a gun. He does come back. He always does. Rick is very good at the dramatic return, but the part of him that was hoping, even a little, that maybe the answer at Blood Ridge might have been different this time, did not come back. That part got buried at the wedding, under his best friend, under the cake, under the body. The man who walked out of that reception is the Rick we have had for every season since. Colder, quicker with a joke, faster to reach for a drink, less likely, ever, to finish a sentence that starts with, I feel. If you want to know why Rick never tells Morty he loves him, the answer is not just Diane. The answer is also Bird Person. Diane taught him that love can be taken. Bird Person taught him that love can be offered and refused. Between those two wounds, there is no safe place left for him to put the feeling, so he does not put it anywhere. He keeps it inside. He makes jokes instead. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously, and over the years, sitting alone with that much kept in, a person starts to talk to themselves. Not out loud usually, quietly, in the small rooms, in the private places. The voice gets mean. The voice repeats what the world has already told them. The voice becomes the cruelest thing in their life. For most people, that voice is something you only hear in your own head. Rick, being Rick, eventually built it as a real thing, on a real planet, in a real room, so he could hear himself tell himself the truth out loud. Section 9. The King of Shit. The Old Man and the Seat and the Architecture of Self-Loathing. In the 4th season of the show, there is an episode that almost everybody writes off as a filler episode. It is called The Old Man and the Seat. It aired in late 2019. The main story of it, on paper, is about Rick going to the bathroom. I am not making that up. That is the plot. The whole first joke of the episode is that when Rick says he is going on a private adventure, what he means is he has to use the toilet. And the toilet he uses is on a whole different planet. Rick, we find out, has built himself a private bathroom. Not in the house, not in a bunker, on a planet, an entire world. A quiet, beautiful, unspoiled alien world with nobody else on it. Nothing on it at all, really. Just rolling hills and gentle wind and one single toilet sitting in the middle of it. No walls, no roof, just a toilet with a view. Rick portals there whenever he needs to go. Already, before anything in the episode has happened, you should slow down on that. Rick Sanchez, the smartest person in the universe, has spent whatever effort it took to find, secure, and set up a private planet whose only purpose is to make sure that when he uses the bathroom, nobody can see him, nobody can hear him, and nobody can get near him. That is not laziness. That is not a funny habit. That is a man who needs, very deeply, to be completely alone for one specific activity, and has built the universe around making sure it happens that way. The episode starts when Rick portals over for his usual private moment, and he notices something has changed. Someone has been here. There is a footprint. The toilet paper is slightly off. The seat is warm. Somebody else has been using his toilet. Rick snaps. He spends the rest of the episode hunting down whoever did it. He treats it like a crime. He scans the planet for traces. He follows a trail across space. He hires help. He goes completely unhinged over what is, in objective reality, a stranger taking one quiet moment on a toilet on an empty planet nobody owns. He finds the guy. The guy's name is Tony. Tony is a regular sort of alien businessman. Middle-aged, tired eyes, a calm voice. He is not evil. He is not an invader. He is just some person who found a nice, quiet toilet one day and decided he liked going there because he did not get a lot of quiet in his own life. Tony, it turns out, is a widower. His wife died some years ago. He is lonely. He liked the toilet because he could sit there and have 10 minutes to himself. Rick, when he catches up to Tony, has several chances to kill him. He threatens him. He does some elaborate revenge pranks. He puts him in a machine that sends him into a kind of heaven built just for him, as a way of trapping him there forever. But every time Rick is about to actually end this man, he cannot do it. He stops. He makes excuses. He comes up with one more escalation instead of just killing the intruder. Why can he not do it? Tony figures it out before Rick does. Tony, in a very quiet scene, tells Rick what he thinks is going on. He tells Rick that Rick is a person who has a small list of people he refuses to kill, and a small list of people he refuses to let into his life. And those two lists are the same list. Rick will not kill him. Rick will also not be friends with him. Tony is one of the people in between. Tony is one of those rare people Rick has looked at and seen, for a second, a reflection of himself. And Rick cannot handle killing that, but he also cannot handle welcoming it. Tony, at the end of their last scene together, offers his friendship. Not in a big speech, just, here, if you ever want to hang out. He holds it out. A lonely old man looking at another lonely old man, saying, I see you. We are the same. We could have lunch. Rick refuses. Rick makes a joke and walks off. Rick leaves a fart bomb as a parting prank because that is who he is. He walks away from the friendship Tony was offering as if it were nothing. But you can see, even in the animation of his face, that it was not nothing. He is rattled. He is walking away a little too fast. Tony, a few scenes later, dies. Not because of Rick, not in a fight, not in revenge. Tony, having been briefly offered a vision of heaven by Rick's machine, has come out the other end of it, inspired to actually start living. He goes and does something he had always wanted to try. He goes space skiing. He is an old widower widower who decided to try one last adventure. And on the way down, he hits a tree and dies. Instantly, off screen. Rick finds out. Rick goes to Tony's office, actually brings him a gift, shows up in person to tell him the toilet is his now. He is ready to do the thing. He is ready to let Tony in. He is ready to start. And the secretary tells him, sorry, Tony is dead. Rick takes it from the outside the way he takes everything. A shrug, a grunt. He walks out. He goes back to the planet with the toilet. And then the show does the thing I want you to sit with, because this is the scene that made the episode famous among people who actually pay attention to this show, even if nobody ever talks about it. Rick sits on the toilet, alone, just him. The person he might have been friends with is dead. He goes to do what he came there to do, to have the quiet moment he always wanted, to have the whole planet to himself. Every obstacle is gone. This is, objectively, the outcome he spent the entire episode fighting for. And Rick rigs up a system of holograms, not before, after Tony dies, after he has confirmed he is alone, after he has the toilet all to himself. Rick sets up a ring of glowing, floating Ricks all around him. He programs them in advance. He presses a button, and the holograms start talking. They talk to him. They say, enjoy this toilet all by yourself. Enjoy using it while you sit there and think about how nobody wants to be around you. Enjoy knowing you ruined it for yourself because you are a huge piece of trash. Look at you, sitting there, king shit on his throne of loneliness. Enjoy this toilet with 1,000 copies of me screaming at you every time you come here. All hail his majesty, the saddest piece of garbage in the entire universe. Long live the big, bad, sorry man. May his reign last 1,000 years. The holograms sing it. They mock him. They pelt him with words. Some of them wear little crowns. One of them, as part of the whole bit, crowns Rick with a tiny toilet crown. It starts to rain in the hologram display. It is staged. It is theatrical. It is humiliating. And Rick sits there and takes it. He does not fight back. He does not turn it off. He designed it this way. This is the part nobody talks about when they talk about this episode. This is the part that, if you actually stop and think about it, is one of the most direct psychological admissions the show has ever made. Rick did not just build a private bathroom. He built a private bathroom, and then, at some point before this day, he sat down and programmed, by hand, a whole set of talking holograms whose entire purpose is to insult him, to call him a loser, to remind him that he is alone, to name him the saddest piece of garbage in the universe. He spent time on this. He wrote the lines. He recorded himself saying them. He set up the projection system. He made the crowns. Why? The show does not tell you why directly, but the answer is not that hard to find if you are willing to look at it. Most people have a voice in their head that says terrible things to them sometimes. A voice that tells them they are a mess, that tells them they are alone because they deserve to be, that tells them they ruined it, whatever it is. Most people try to quiet that voice. Most people try to argue with it, or distract from it, or go to therapy and learn where it came from. Rick did not do that. Rick, instead, built the voice out of hardware. He took the meanest internal narrator he had and turned it into a machine he could step into. He made his self-hatred a thing he could visit. He made it a room. Which means that a part of Rick, a part of him he does not want anyone else to see, needs to hear those things said out loud. Needs to sit there and be called a piece of garbage by his own voice. Needs the confirmation. Needs it so badly that he turned the confirmation into a theme park attraction he can use on demand. The cruelty Rick shows other people is legendary. He insults Morty. He belittles Jerry. He is mean to Beth. He is cold to Summer. He picks on strangers. He is always ready with a put-down. The show sometimes plays this like it is a character flaw, and sometimes like it is a style of humor. But after this episode, you cannot really watch those moments the same way, because the holograms show you where the cruelty comes from. The cruelty he uses on other people is not even close to the cruelty he uses on himself. What he says to Morty on a bad day is mild. What he says to Jerry is almost gentle. What he reserves for himself, when he thinks nobody else is listening, is 1,000 voices calling him the saddest piece of garbage in the cosmos, while he sits on a toilet wearing a little crown and crying in the rain. This is important to understand about Rick. It is important for the whole show. It is important for every mean thing he says to anyone you love. He is not mean because he thinks he is better than other people. He is mean because he thinks he is the worst person alive and has decided, at some level below thinking, that everyone around him should know what that looks like. He is teaching them what he already knows about himself. The cruelty is not hatred pointed outward. It is hatred that got too big to keep inside, so it started leaking. And the other thing the scene tells you, quietly, is about loneliness. Rick had a chance this episode episode to make a friend, a real one, a grown man, not a grandson, not a family member, somebody who was not obligated to be around him, somebody his own age, his own flavor of tired. Tony was offering. Rick said no. And now Tony is dead. And Rick is sitting in the thing he thought he wanted, which is total silence, total solitude, total privacy, and realizing, in the middle of it, that what he actually wants is something else, something he does not have the vocabulary to ask for, something he gave up a long time ago. The hologram ring is how he asks for it. It is the closest he can come to saying, somebody hurt me today, somebody tell me I deserve it, somebody confirm the story I tell myself so I do not have to wonder anymore. Even if the somebody is just me, pre-recorded, on a loop. This is the private face of Rick. This is what he is when nobody is watching, and Tony is dead, and Morty is home, and Beth is somewhere else, and the toilet is finally his. This is what the most powerful man in the universe built for himself, alone, as his reward. A throne made of his own voice, telling him he is worthless. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Remember this scene. Remember this setup. Remember that Rick sits inside a structure he designed on purpose so he could be told, in detail, by copies of himself, that his whole life is a mess and that it is his fault. Because there is somebody else in this show who has looked at Rick's whole life and come to the exact same conclusion. And he is going to say it to Rick's face, out loud, in front of a grandson he has been lying to for years. And the person about to deliver the verdict is not a hologram. The person about to deliver it is a child Rick thought he had beaten a long time ago. Section 10, The Infinite Crib, Evil Morty's Diagnosis, and the show's final argument. There is a character in this show called Evil Morty. He is introduced, very briefly, all the way back in the first season. In an episode where Rick and Morty end up on a space fortress called the Citadel, where thousands of Ricks and Mortys from other universes all live together, we meet a specific Morty wearing an eye patch. He does not say much, but in the last shot of the episode, the show lets us linger on him, and we realize, for the first time, that there is a version of Morty out there who is not a nervous kid. He is something else. He is planning something. He is patient. He disappears for seasons. He shows up once or twice, mostly in the background. The show teases him. The fans build whole fan theories around him. And then, in the final episode of the 5th season, he comes back fully, and he says the sentence that the entire show has been building toward without any of us quite realizing it. Let me walk you through how it happens. Evil Morty, by the time of the 5th season finale, has worked his way up to being the president of the Citadel. He rules the whole place. Thousands of Ricks and Mortys below him, and he has a plan. He has been working on it his whole life. He has maneuvered, killed, manipulated, and waited for years to get to this specific position, because this specific position is the only one that lets him do what he actually wants. What he actually wants is to leave. Not leave the Citadel, leave the entire part of the universe that has Rick in it. See, here is the thing the show reveals in this finale, and it is the single most important piece of information in the whole series. For seasons, Rick has been telling Morty that there are infinite universes, infinite versions of everyone, infinite realities where everything that could happen has happened. That is true, technically, but Evil Morty in this episode tells us the quiet part that Rick has never said. There are infinite universes, yes, but the part of the universe that Rick lives in and travels in and operates in is a specific part, a fenced-off part, a section of the endlessness that was deliberately walled off on purpose by Ricks a long time ago. And the rule for being inside that walled-off section is simple. In every universe inside the fence, Rick is the smartest person alive. Every single one. The smartest man in the room, every reality, guaranteed. The fence has a name. The show calls it the Central Finite Curve. But forget the name. What it actually is this. It is a part of the universe that Rick and every other Rick built so they would never, ever have to meet anybody smarter than them. They cut themselves off. They drew a line around a section of reality where their intelligence was the ceiling, and they locked every version of themselves inside it. Outside the fence, there are other universes. Universes where Rick is not the smartest person. Universes where Rick is average, or dumb, or not even born. But no Rick lives out there. They all live inside the fence, by design. Evil Morty, standing in front of our Morty, in the last episode of the 5th season, looks at the machine he has spent his whole life building. The machine that will finally let him cross the fence and escape to the real universe outside. And he says this. He says, they built a wall around infinity. They separated all the infinite universes from all the infinite universes where he is the smartest man in the universe. Every version of us has spent every version of all of our lives in one infinite crib built around an infinite baby. Hold on that image for a second. An infinite crib built around an infinite baby. Rick is the baby. Every Rick in every universe inside the fence is the baby. They are the ones in the crib. They are the ones being protected. They are the ones who could not handle being in a universe where somebody else was smarter than them, so they built a nursery the size of forever and locked themselves inside it. And every Morty, every version, ever, across every reality the show has ever visited, is in there too, because the baby needed something to play with. The baby needed a sidekick. The baby needed something small and loyal and easy to scare. Evil Morty says it flat out. He says that Mortys exist for Ricks, that Ricks across the universes inside the fence have engineered Mortys on purpose. They have pushed Beths and Jerrys together in universe after universe across countless realities specifically to make Mortys, because Mortys are useful to Ricks. Mortys are camouflage. Mortys are comfort. Mortys are a way for a damaged old man to feel like a protector instead of a patient. And whenever a Rick needs another Morty, there is always one more being made, somewhere on schedule. The fence keeps Ricks on top. The fence also keeps Mortys supplied. That is the system. That is what Rick and all the other Ricks built. Now, here's the part that makes the whole show finally snap into focus. Our Rick tries to push back. He tries to tell Evil Morty that he, personally, is not responsible for every other Rick out there. That he is not like those guys. That there are fine Ricks and bad Ricks, and he is one of the fine ones. And Evil Morty, without even raising his voice, gives the answer the whole show needed somebody to give. He says, they literally all say that. He says every Rick in the whole fence has that excuse. None of them have to be responsible, because they all tell themselves that the bad Ricks are other Ricks. They are all victims of themselves. They are all hiding inside the same story. The story is, I am in pain, so the things I do not count. The story is, I had it hard, so the people I hurt do not matter. The story is, I am a genius, so the normal rules do not apply to me. Every Rick across infinity is running the same script, and our Rick is included. Our Rick, the one we have been riding along with for 7 seasons, the one we have been rooting for, the one we have been explaining away, the one we have been protecting in our heads, is doing the exact same thing as every other one of these men. The script looks like personality from a distance. Up close, it is a defense. And Evil Morty, who has watched Ricks his whole life, can see that none of them, including ours, get to be the exception. This is the show, finally, diagnosing its own main character. Not through the therapist, not through Morty, through a character who was raised inside this system, understood it earlier than anyone else, and spent decades figuring out how to break the fence and walk away. And our Morty, watching this, sees something he has never quite had words for before. He sees the infrastructure. He sees the crib. He sees that his whole life, every dimension he has ever lived in, every version of his family, every grandfather he has ever had, has been part of a machine built by sad, smart old men to keep themselves comfortable. And he sees his grandfather inside it, not as a hero, not as a god, just as one of the babies. It does something to him. The episode does not tell us exactly what. He looks at Rick a little differently. He has always been loyal. He will, for the most part, stay loyal, but a door has opened. He has been handed a truth that nobody can close back up. Evil Morty does not stay to watch what our Morty does with it. Evil Morty finishes his machine. He breaks the fence. He opens a portal into the part of the universe Ricks were hiding from. And then, in the last shot of the season, he steps through it, into a part of reality where Rick is not the smartest man alive, where Rick might not even exist, where the infinite crib cannot reach. He leaves. He is free. He does not look back. That is the clearest moment the show has ever offered about what Rick is and what Rick has done. Everything we have looked at in this video has been pieces of a bigger picture. The wound in the garage from section 1, where Diane died. The therapist in section 2, who saw through Rick and whom Rick walked away from. The suicide attempt in section 3, the one he never talked about again. The 12-year-old boy burying his own body in section 4. The cabinet of erased memories under the garage in section 5. The daughter in section 6, raised so badly she became a copy of him without knowing it. The clone paranoia in section 7, where she asked if she was even real, and he shrugged. The confession at Blood Ridge in section 8, when his best friend said no and broke something in him that never healed. The holograms in section 9, the ring of voices on a private planet telling him, in his own voice, that he was the saddest piece of garbage in the cosmos. Now put all of those next to what Evil Morty says. Every one of those things is Rick using his intelligence to make himself comfortable, at the cost of someone else's peace. He builds a pocket world to avoid parenting his daughter. He builds a memory cabinet so his grandson will not resent him. He builds an AI of his dead wife to punish himself instead of mourning her. He builds a private planet so he never has to share space. He builds holograms so he can be mocked by himself instead of having to face it from somewhere real. He builds a multiverse-wide fence so no mind can ever sit above his. Everything Rick builds, every invention, every gadget, every breakthrough, is the same thing as the fence, just smaller. He is always walling things off. He is always making sure the version of the world he has to live in is one where he is the biggest thing in it. That is not a philosophy. That is a survival strategy. And the cost of the survival strategy is everyone else. His daughter's clarity, his grandson's memories, his best friend's wedding, his wife's rest, his own capacity, long since gone, to walk into a room and be a person instead of a shield. The reason Rick and Morty works as a show at its best is that it has, quietly, for 7 seasons, been showing us a man doing this and asking us to see it. Not to hate him for it, not to forgive him for it, just to see it. To stop calling the fence wisdom. To stop calling the wall around him a worldview. To stop letting him sell us on the idea that he has figured something out that we haven't, when really he is just a very smart, very sad old man who never learned how to sit still in the presence of his own feelings and has spent his whole life building reasons to stay busy. The show has not ended. There are more seasons coming. There is more story to tell. Whether Rick ever crosses his own fence, whether he ever walks into the part of himself he has spent a lifetime engineering around, is an open question. The show has hinted, quietly, that he is trying. He still sees the therapist, sometimes. He still tries, sometimes, to be there for Morty. He is not the same man he was when we met him, but the fence is still up. And somewhere out there, past the wall he built, in a part of the universe no Rick has ever visited, there is a kid with an eye patch who already figured out what Rick has not. That you cannot invent your way out of a wound. You have to walk out. And the only way out, for anybody, is through the one place Rick Sanchez has refused to go for 7 straight seasons. The quiet room, with no adventure in it, where the feeling is waiting. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.